So, you see that the entire journey is related to ego. And ego technically is an I thought. So we translate this I thought also as a desire. Where there is a desire, there has to be a desirer. So desire for real self goes inside. Ego has nothing to hang on outside. But desire outside, so there is a joy of attachment, there is a pleasure of indulgence, and then there is a ego of possession. Now the ego means this is me and this is mine. I am, I have a car. I am, I have a house. I am, I have a body. So this, whether you say desire, whether you say Maya, whether you say ego, they are different expressions of the same thing, same expressions. And this is what the false identification is. False identification. So I have to drop this false identification. Not only I have to be aware of the ego, I have to understand how the ego, how the desire, how the ignorance leads me to illusion. We are caught by this illusion all the time. All the time. By mistake, we identify with our body, mind, ego, instead of pure, infinite Satchidananda. That is the problem of ignorance. So that is what the 60 topic 63 and the 64 says, that we should understand the real I and also the false I by discernment and dispassion. So there the master uses say that there is a problem of superimposition. So body, mind, intellect, ego, plus all the thought process pertaining to the world, they are the factors which is superimposed on the real self, and the real self borrows some, so to say, it does not, but borrows some qualities of this body, mind, intellect, ego. And just both, the way the real self borrows some qualities from these factors, same way the body also borrows some qualities of the real self. Real self is permanent, mind deeply knows it, and the mind says, oh, can I live forever? So when I say, can I live forever, it is the body. I'm talking of the body. And there comes the illusion. That illusion, and that continues, and we continue to suffer. Just say, for example, at the emotional level, mind gets angry, but I say I am angry. Mind gets upset, but I say I am upset. But the anger belongs to the mind, upset belongs to the mind. And then, that ego becomes the entire me. Look at the result of this superimposition. And that is why we say we are bound, we are limited by the body and the mind. Again, why? due to ignorance and the superimposition. Either. Well, no, we can say ignorance is the last result. First, there is a superimposition which results into ignorance. What is ignorance? Ignorance is false assumption. What is false assumption? I am angry. Here in this example. And that we continue throughout our life. So the master says we should understand here is a real I, here is a false I, here is a superimposition, and what superimposes? On one side there is a real self, and what superimposes on the other side? It may be a body, it may be mind, it may be intellect, it may be prana. The two traits of the prana is hunger and thirst, and I see that I'm hungry. But it is a property of prana. It has nothing to do with me. And I'm hungry, I get agitated. Let me find the restaurant. While traveling so long, obviously, you will land up in any restaurant. And there, then what happens? The mind in the background says, oh, this restaurant is okay. What I like is available here. So there's the joy of attachment. Now, hunger is not met. Joy of attachment is, there is a joy in attachment. There is a pleasure in indulgence. That is met. So should I not eat food? No. You should eat food. But I should maintain my awareness that in the action of the eating, there is a peace before, during, and after. Why? Peace is my essential nature. Peace is my essential nature. So I recognize that hunger is the property of the prana. That results into a sense of freedom, freedom from the mind. It looks very simple. What looks very simple? That, okay, the path of the freedom is to understand that this is the real self and this is the false I. Intellectually, it looks very good. Intellectually, we understood. But what to do with millions and trillions of impressions of joy of attachment, pleasure of indulgence, ego of possession? They are already there. So intellect goes into the mind, and the mind assimilates it with the joy of attachment or pleasure of indulgence or ego of possession, and we fall back into the illusion. It happens. It happens. It happens so easily. So the master says, I have to understand what is superimposition, who superimposes on whom, what is the real self, what is the false self. Then only we can discover our true nature. You can just put up mathematically. So in Eastern wisdom, we say superimposition is known as adhyasa. So superimposition means the qualities of the body is superimposed on the real self, and the qualities of the real self is superimposed on the body. When it happens in ignorance. When I'm a non-thinking entity, when I'm living my life impulsively, habitually, so the best example Eastern wisdom gives, what it gives? Mistaking rope for a snake. The rope for a snake. The moment we remember, I should remember superimposition. Who superimposes on whom? Real self, false I. False I, real I. And why? Because I'm just moving through the animal mind. It demands this kind of a self-inquiry all the time. So the second point is due to ignorance, The individual identifies with upadhi. We say upadhi, like the body, mind, prana, intellect, particular thought. They are upadhis. One is superimposition because of the traits and upadhis. So upadhis, I am fat. So fatness has to do with the body. I am not fat. I am thin. I am weak. It has to do with the body. It has not to do with my real self. So that is the second point. The first point is uh, superimposition. Second point is due to that, due to ignorance, I don't recognize what is the real I, what is the false I. So while during driving for thousands of kilometers, in the moment your mind says, I am tired. So sit down for a while and say, this body is tired, not I am. Now what happens? First, you recognize. Second is you become aware. I am the real self. Real self cannot be tired. So if your action is done in peace, what is the action? Action of driving. So you are driving in peace, for peace, out of the peace, you will not be tired. I can bet you. So it means I live in that extraordinary awareness. 2 point. Third point is upadhis. So we should recognize these upadhis, what superimposes from the individual self. Individual self, it is body, it is prana, it is sense organ, it is mind, it is intellect, it is ego. That is the third point. I thought says I have become old. You can say I have become old, I cannot drive. So now this upadhi causes the ignorance, and ultimately the ignorance blocks your real nature. Third point. Fourth point, superimposing upadhis qualities onto the self. We are understanding, we are examining. Now, what are the upadhis? Body, mind, intellect, ego. Give some qualities in ignorance to the real self. Then I claim this is my real self. I am fat, I am tired, I am irritated, I am agitated, I am angry, I am frustrated. All these I have borrowed the traits. Water is not hot. So water borrows the qualities of heat, and that is why we feel it is a hot water. You leave the water as it is, and after some time, because it is not the intrinsic nature of the water again becomes cold. So what it means, by leaving the water as it is for some time, leaving the mind as it is, not getting carried away, not absence of joy of attachment, absence of pleasure of indulgence, and there is no ego of possession. So that is the meaning that you leave the water, you leave the mind as it is, and you discover there is no problem. So remember, superimposition. On one side there is the real self, on the other side is the panch kosha, including the body, mind, intellect, thought, past impressions, vasanas, etc., etc. So, and then remember the word ignorance, superimposition. So now we have understood these four aspects of it. What is the fifth? The self ever remains pure, witnessing consciousness. So it means I have to explore and extract, first by intellectual understanding, that this real self does not change. We have already defined what we have defined. The real self is independent. Real self does not change. The real self does not depend on the changing. And what is the false I? False I depends on the real self. It is constantly changing. The real self is the knower. The false I is the known. We are 100% clear. So when that clarity is there in the mind is pure, and that purity of the mind helps us to recognize that yes, there is some entity which is pure, and that results into awakening. That is the fifth point. And let us pick up the sixth point, the ego sense. Again, what problem comes? The ego sense creates a doer and the experiencer in me. I feel pain, experiencer. I feel joy, experiencer. So I lay too much of importance on my experience of pain and pleasure. I do not see, I do not examine if there is really an experiencer. That is only an I thought. That is purely an I thought. That is an ego sense. So this is another problem of ignorance that creeps over mind and causes suffering. So ego sense in the notion of doership, why it arises? Answer is it arises due to superimposition. I am the doer. Superimposition. And what are the factors of superimposition on the side of the false side? Body, mind, intellect, ego, and I. I'm just going, we are going into the same mathematical problem. So we refer to the superimposition, we refer to the body, mind, ego, intellect, and the prana on one side, the real self on one side. I'm walking. For example, I'm walking and talking to you. So I'm walking and talking through the body and the sense organs. So instantly there is a doership is there. Inside there is a doership, but that doership has been created by an I thought. But where is the I thought? I thought is present in the mind. But the mind is an instrument. It cannot be the knower. It cannot be the doer. I forget this point. So that forgetfulness is ignorance. Again, see the ignorance, superimposition. Who superimposes on what? What qualities is being superimposed on the real self? And what qualities of the real self is superimposed on the body, mind, intellect, and the ego? That is what we are understanding. So I have to contemplate. You sit down every day and then you see what is happening. Am I the doer? Yes, I'm the doer. So what I'm going to do, and you will find out the desire. In that, the doer takes birth only when there is a desire in the mind. Desire comes from the past impressions, that is known as sanskaras. These sanskaras are buried deep down inside my mind, that is known as the vasana. So vasana, sanskar, thought in the form of a desire, and then the I thought, and then the doer and the experience. See, clarity. I told you this master says that you can understand this. You can, understanding means cognitive ability. Cognitive ability means that now there is an awareness. What is that awareness? There is a self-awareness and there is a false awareness. I'm free. Now see the opposite side. If I'm not free, then what does it mean by that I'm not free? What does it mean? that those thoughts are constantly creating a cycle of doership, desire, completed, incomplete. Let me make an effort again. You're driving 1,500 kilometers. You have driven 1,000 kilometers. The mind desire says another 500 kilometers. So that is constantly, the mind is constantly moving with desire, the ego sense, experiencer, and the doer, plus the action. What that means. This is the cycle of birth and death. So we start thinking what happened in my previous birth. So the master doesn't know anything about the previous birth, and then they say, I will take you to the past life. Past life, unnecessary. And then we are caught in that delusion. We are caught in that delusion. So those masters who take you to your past life, they already know too much about you. So they create a sense of a story. Oh, in the past life you were this. That is why you have so much of pain. Oh, you did lot of good things in the past life. That is why you are rich. Unnecessary. We need not to get entangled into this. So cycle of birth and death is all because of the ego sense, superimposition, and identification with the body, mind, intellect, I thought, doer, experiencer. Now you see, you have to bring, it's a puzzle. You have to bring all of them together. Understand the superimposition, understand the ignorance, understand the real I, understand the false I, understand the thoughts that is creating the doer and the experiencer, and now rearrange them in such an order so that you find there is no cycle of birth and death. There is a joy of attachment, of eating pasta, for example. Joy of attachment. There is a pleasure of indulgence. What it means? I am hungry, my mind says pasta. So the cycle is being repeated. Cycle is being repeated. This is known as the cycle of birth and death. First, I should know what is happening to me in my current life. Then I will know what is the past life. I have to start from here to know if there is a past life or not. First, I should become free. So when in that sense of the freedom, I know, then I can explore if there is a past life or not. I have to understand that we forget to understand that we are caught in the delusion, and then our teachers, our teachers exploit us. Nobody dares ready to listen to the naked truth. Why? Because I hide the joy of attachment. I hide the joy of attachment. One guy, here was saying, what a problem with you then if I go for the sex. I said, I don't have a problem. Your mind has a problem of joy of attachment. So when you are sick with the joy of attachment, you see that happiness lies outside. That is the problem. Problem is not going for the sex. I'm not saying. I said, you have a lot of money, so invite 10 people to have it. And then ask yourself, are you in happiness? He's quite young, he's 32, 33. He drives very big car. No, he said, that makes a sense. So he said, then he asked me that it is all a psychological. I said, yes, it is happening in your mind. you have to get rid of that joy of attachment, one, that results into pleasure of indulgence, two, and that causes the ego of possession, that I possess the pleasure. Whenever I need it, I will have a pleasure. But that fact of the factor pleasure is dependent on the outside. You are not happy. You are frustrated. So internally you are frustrated because the cycle of attachment and the pleasure continues. Outside, you feel as if you are satisfied. So he said, that makes a sense. I said, no, that only makes a sense when you recognize it. So now you have recognized, you have understood. So what is going to happen now to your mind? Next time you have a joy of attachment, that thought comes to your mind, what you will think, where your mind takes you. My mind takes me that happiness is not outside. It is a delusion. Yes. So when you recognize it is a delusion, you have started this self-inquiry. And now you can drop the identification. So he said, he's very quite intelligent. He said, so I dropped the identification. It means I recognized that there is no pleasure in the body. Yes, then I will not go for it. I said, that is what I'm saying. What happened in few minutes? You have recognized it. You have recognized it. Cognitive ability. Or is that the self-inquiry? I don't remember exactly. Perhaps in 1850, during 1850, somewhere in California, there was a movement almost 200, 150 or 200 years ago. The American psyche, American mind was obsessed in those days about the sex. And that idea still lives in the mind of Americans. So they have started pornography and etc. They have started everything. So it is inbuilt. It is inbuilt in my mind in America. I'm not going there because it's a long story. So another point, the self-knowledge alone removes this incorrect identification. You can continue doing the practice without knowledge. It will not work. It is not working. So the master says that self-knowledge alone, and the self-knowledge alone can remove this incorrect identification. So the moment you have the word identification, remember the superimposition. What superimposes on what? The real self on the false self, and the false self on the real self. So then there is a mixture, where as long as there is a mixture, there will be millions of desires. Out of those millions of desire, I will pick up only which I have experienced in the past, which has given me the pleasure. So the cycle again starts. Cycle of birth and the death again starts. It is a matter of clear understanding, my friend. So what is happening? We can pick up another point, that real self appears as individual self due to ignorance and identification. That real self which has no name in the form. But now that appears as individual self with the body, mind, prana, thought, desires, pleasure, attachment. I don't notice that I am attached. I don't notice that I have an indulgence. I don't notice that I have an ego. I say this ego is me and mine. This is the highest level of superimposition. And ultimately, we live in ignorance. Eighth point. So, real self appears as individual due to ignorance and identification. Ninth, now what is the result? Where we are? The ignorance veils. Ignorance hides. Avidya. Avidya means ignorance. So ignorance veils. Veils means hides. So that ignorance hides that one real self of the nature of Sat Chit Anand, of the nature of absolute existence, consciousness, and bliss. First, it hides. So when it hides, then what is left? Now that very nature, real self, is hidden. So then what happens to the mind? How the mind perceives the world? You are an individual. I am also an individual. I am man, so you are a woman. So then mind says, no, are you not attracted to this? Don't you like this? And the journey continues. Again, so you have to control. Ignorance hides the real self. So the two factors are there. Darkness hides all the articles present in the room. Same way the ignorance hides my real self. And now I am still, my sense organs are still active, my mind is still active, my intellect is still active. So what it sees? As such, there is no real self. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of individuals, there are a lot of things in the world. And then my mind says the entire world is an object of pleasure. Why? Because it has hidden the permanent peace inside me. So I start running after. I feel the sense of incompleteness. Desire means I am seeking something other than me. Why other than me? Because I don't know myself. Why? It is hidden. Why it is hidden? Because of ignorance. That is what I made an explanation, made a phrase. Ignorance hides the real self. But hiding the real self causes the entire problem. Then I have a desire in search of the pleasure, indulgence, etc. And ultimately, I see the entire world is a dual world, is made up of the opposites. I have to constantly make an effort. My honey doesn't agree, divorce, have another. For example, just go on. I don't like this refrigerator, throw it away, buy another. I don't like this car. So I see my entire world. I don't see the beauty in the world. I see everything in the world is made for the pleasure. That is a greater ignorance. Ninth. Ninth. Self-knowledge. Now, what is the solution? The self-knowledge, through the self-inquiry, removes the avidya, removes the ignorance. Remove the ignorance. Now, convert all these 10 points uh, in a simple way, the way the physics works, the context, what is the context, what is the pragmatic approach, what is the principle, what is the principle is main. From that principle, we create a lot of concepts. And then we think in terms of the context. So I'm just trying to trying to present the same thing in a purely scientific way. What exactly is the context of the topic number 63 and the 64? So the human problem is identifying with the body-mind complex due to ignorance. That is the context about the true self. So I take it, I identify, I don't see there is an identification, but I see this body-mind complex is the real I. That is the context. This causes bondage and suffering. True nature is liberated self. So that is the context. And so what about the pragmatic approach? So I have to apply this self-inquiry. Geometrical problems, we start with a hypothesis that this is not true, and ultimately we prove it is true. The false becomes, or the real becomes. So that is what the self-inquiry, we have to go for the self-inquiry. Self-inquiry and the reasoning. Why reasoning? I have to negate the false identification through knowledge of the real self. That is purely a pragmatic approach. Apply teaching. We have to apply these teachings to drop the identification with what is not the real self or what is the false self through the self-inquiry. I have to reason now. So what happens? This removes the ignorance. This removes the superimposition based on ignorance. Okay. So now let us pick up the basis. What are the fundamental basis of Eastern wisdom? We say the real self is the supreme consciousness. It cannot have a binary format. It is one pure consciousness. That consciousness is the nature of knowledge, peace, happiness, love, and wisdom. Ignorance is hiding this reality. I have to negate what is hiding the reality. We are going back to the same 10 points, but in a different way. So we know that here is the principle, here is the concept. So there the master comes out with an example as the waves are a false an imagination on the surface of the water. Same way, the entire multiplicity of the universe is like the waves on the consciousness. As if the water is a consciousness, you have different waves. That water is the pure consciousness, and we see the waves as a reality. We see the entire world of change, the name and the form as a reality. First, I have to see that identification at the individual level, and then I see the same imagination at the level of the world. So my ignorance is gone. And my ignorance is gone, then I find the real self. That is the way. So what are the principles involved? So if we look back into the principles, making it more logical, I'm putting the same 10 points in a different way so that you can think in that way. So what are the key principles? First principle, adhyasa, or the false superimposition. So now, but who superimposes on what? So here again we have false and the real I. So some traits of the real superimposed on the false I. So say my body is eternal, which is not possible, and I try to work. I told you that this guy who is an IT guy who earns about 40 or 50 millions a year, and he spends $10 million to keep his body young, starting from starting from vitamins and supplements and keeping the skin and using lot of chemicals, and he wants to keep this body as young as possible. What is that superimposition? Body keeps on changing. That very change is not under your control. Has to be done by the existence. Do whatever you want to. You want to take over the entire control of chains of the body? Not possible. Even with AI and robot and all the costly medicines, not at all possible. It is a fact, it is a truth. $10 million. But he's getting 40 million, so out of which $10 million, he's around, I think, 60. No doubt, no doubt, he looks in his 30s. I forgot his name, otherwise I should have told you. I saw just a couple of months ago. So, what is the principle? First thing we understand, the real I and the false I coexist. False I and the real I coexist. You cannot remove that, you cannot break up that coexistence. And that is why we need a self inquiry. We don't need a judgmental mind, we need viveka. Why I gave the example of this guy, I tell you. So when my intellect is judgmental. Judgmental means I like one thing over the other. I like the body over the other. And then my decision will be to take care of the body and keep it young. So that is the purpose of being judgmental. And what is the role of discernment? I don't see the likes and dislikes. I see them separate from me. So we don't use the judgmental, we use the viveka. So what is the viveka? Viveka between the real and the false. So if someone teaches him, this guy, find out. Even if you don't know what is real, find out what is constantly changing. Can you affect the change to a certain extent? Old car, you can repair it. How long? This guy is also crazy. He said, I have such a beautiful car. From outside, it looks, he keeps that car clean and it looks as if he just bought the car. But it has 294,000 miles, almost 300,000 miles. Engine is saying goodbye, but he's attached to the car. Problem is that he is attached to the car. So he does not recognize a constant changing identity. What should I do? I said, you have a lot of money, you buy a new car. You're not attending my session just for the sake of which car I should buy or whether I should buy a car or not. You are here to get rid of your stress. So people are totally... So discernment is required. Judgment, if I'm judgmental, I like this car. So, or if you have more space, it is better to buy a new house and keep this car as an antique. This car has 8 or 9 seater, plus you have a lot of space for the luggage. American made car. I said, it is so simple. So the principle attached here is discernment, and discernment to get rid of the superimposition. Judgmental, if your intellect follows the judgment, it cannot get rid of it. It does not know what superimposes on what, and you cannot reach to the witness consciousness. That is the great mistake people are making in the journey. Because highly intellectual people enter into this journey of the self discovery, and then they do not know what exactly is the difference between discernment and judgmental mind. This is what about the principle. What about if we pick up some of the concepts? Again, the same repetition, but it will help you to understand. So we say find out by inquiry. There is a witness consciousness that is unaffected by any change. No, but I have yet to find out. It is already found out. Since morning until late night before going to sleep, you have used this I as a doer, I as a eater, I as a walker, I as a body, I. But that I is a common factor. That I is the witness. You are recognizing this I as a false I. Do you remember what happened yesterday? I remember. Who is this I? Mind contains the memory, but ultimately this I. Who remembers what happened day before yesterday? Who was sleeping? I was sleeping. Who was awake yesterday? I was awake. Who was dreaming yesterday? I was. So it means, is this I different in sleep, dream, and waking, or is I the same? If the I is the same, obviously, it is a witness consciousness. That I is not going to change. So we have found out this I witness consciousness. But because of the false identification, my mind, because of the impurity of the mind, my mind got attached to body, mind, intellect, ego, past desires, vasanas, and then we fall. So there is a witness consciousness and there is a false I which is identified. That false I is neither the doer and the experiencer. This is what the topic 63 and 64. Example, mistaking rope to a snake, wave ocean illusion, sun appearing fragmented when we see lot of clouds. Then I see the sun is here in between this cloud, sun is here in between this cloud, sun is also there in between this cloud. I see that spark everywhere and I claim that spark is the sun. Or you can say 10 buckets of water, the sun is reflected in all the buckets, and I claim that there are 10 different suns, 10 different individuals. Another concept means, there are small parts of the entire principle. That is how the physics understands. So ignorance imposes reality on the unreal. That is another concept, we can extract it. We can also extract another principle. The world emerges when I identifies with the body, mind. This word appears only. I say this is the word house, this is the house, this is the car, this is the wall, and there is already an I-ness present inside. So the entire world is created by this I. The Buddha says Buddha says you remove the I, the world dissolves. How can you identify if there is no I? So this I creates the entire world. Illusion ends when experience understood to be a witnessing principle. And we have to think rope snake metaphor. Consciousness seems conditional but remains unconditioned. Another principle. No, not principle, but a concept. Water wave metaphor. Wave is only a movement in the water. So the self-inquiry is very important. One, reasoning is very important, but reasoning should support viveka and vairagya. The reasoning should not support I made a judgment that I am the body and I will spend $10 million on this body. So I hide myself of the fact that this body is constantly changing. I have relative control over the body. I do not have a full control over the body. There is no chance. But if I have a full control over the body, then I will keep this body as long as it takes. I'll say, no, I will live for 200 years. Obviously, then there is no fear. So because of the fear of losing this body, I'm spending $10 million every year on this body. So this is judgment. This is not Vivek. This is not discernment. Very great guy he is, Very great guy. Is there anything left? 63 and 64. So we should be very clear about these terms. Superimposition. Ignorance is different. Superimposition is different. What is superimposition? Always keep an example, the hot water. The intrinsic nature of the water is cold, but when I say hot water, there is a superimposition of heat in the water. The water has borrowed some properties of the heat, and the heat has borrowed some properties of the water. That is why we say hot water. So the intrinsic nature of the fire is heat. Intrinsic nature of the water is cold. That is how. Intrinsic means real nature, not the false nature. So we borrow some properties and we give some properties. So who borrows some properties and who gives? In ignorance. It happens in ignorance. So in ignorance, it is the combination of the body, mind, intellect, ego on one side and the real self on the other side. In Sanskrit, we say these are known as upadhis, adjuncts. I think upadhis have common. So these upadhis are of million types. Starting in the morning, I have a headache. So I, real I, headache pertaining to the body, superimposed problem. I'm angry. I'm agitated. I hate you. I like you. I am fat. I am thin. I am frustrated. I don't have money. I am poor. I am rich. Go on. Go on. Consciousness cannot be rich, poor, painful. It has nothing to do with it. But identification, superimposition. And for superimposition, all these factors are always available. and that results into non-thinking. And when I don't discern, when I don't do the viveka, the problem continues. Mistaken identity. Mistaken identity, wrong notion, idea, this is what the ignorance is. By when the body becomes old, I start thinking I have become old. You see, my mind is so much heavily conditioned. You don't agree with me, then I'm angry. So the impact of superimposition is so tremendous in our daily life. That is what a New Age community say. It is a body-mind complex. Is I, false I, the, the real I is different. So while driving, but drive safely, but keep on contemplating and reflecting